When I announced my pregnancy, my mother-in-law said, "Abort it before you curse our family with a defective child." I never imagined that the happiest moment of my life would become the moment I saw my husband's family for who they really were. Finding out I was pregnant was something I had dreamed about for years. My husband, Daniel, and I had been married for almost 3 years. We had a small apartment, stable jobs, a simple but happy life. We weren't rich. We didn't have everything figured out, but we loved each other. And when I saw those 2 lines on the pregnancy test, I felt like my entire world changed. I remember sitting on the bathroom floor with tears in my eyes, not because I was scared, because I was overwhelmed. There was a tiny life growing inside me. Someone who didn't even exist yet had already become the most important person in my world. Daniel was at work when I found out. I waited until he came home. I placed the test inside a small gift box along with a pair of tiny baby socks. When he opened it, he froze. Then he looked at me. Then back at the box. For a few seconds, he couldn't say anything. And then he hugged me so tightly that I started laughing through my tears. That night, we talked for hours. About names. About the nursery. About the kind of parents we wanted to become. We knew it wouldn't be easy. But we were ready. A few weeks later, we decided to tell both of our families. My parents were emotional. My mother cried. My father immediately started talking about all the things he wanted to teach his future grandchild. It was exactly the reaction I had hoped for. Then we went to Daniel's parents' house. And that's when everything changed. Daniel's mother, Victoria, had always been difficult. She wasn't the type of person who openly insulted you. She was much more subtle. She used small comments, small criticisms, small reminders that she believed she knew better. She questioned my career, my cooking, the way I decorated our home. She always had an opinion. NB. I tried to ignore it. And because she was Daniel's mother. And I wanted a peaceful relationship with her. And when we arrived at her house that evening, she seemed excited. And she had prepared dinner. And everyone was sitting around the table. And Daniel and I exchanged a smile. And this was the moment. And after dinner, Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out a small envelope. And inside was the first ultrasound picture. And we placed it on the table. And at first, everyone smiled. And Daniel's father looked shocked. And his sister immediately congratulated us. And Victoria picked up the ultrasound photo. And as she stared at it. And for a moment, I thought she was emotional. And thought maybe she was overwhelmed by becoming a grandmother. And then she asked if we had done genetic testing. And the question felt strange. But I answered honestly. And he told her we had scheduled all the necessary appointments. And she asked about my family's medical history. And then Daniel's. And then she started asking questions that felt less like concern and more like an investigation. He looked at Daniel. He noticed too. But before either of us could say anything, Victoria placed the ultrasound picture back on the table. And then she said something that completely changed the atmosphere. And she said she hoped we had thought carefully about bringing a child into the world. And at first, I didn't understand. And he thought maybe she was talking about finances. Nor responsibility. And then she continued. And she said there was no guarantee the baby would be perfect. She talked about family reputation. About genetics. About how one mistake could affect generations. He felt my stomach drop. Not because of fear. Because I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was my child. She was talking about. A baby she had never met. A baby who had done nothing wrong. Then she looked directly at me. And said the words that would stay with me forever. Abort it before you curse our family with a defective child. Then the room went completely silent. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Nay looked around the table waiting for someone to tell her she had gone too far. Daniel's father looked uncomfortable. His sister looked shocked. But the person I needed to hear from most was sitting beside me. Daniel. And my husband. Nth father of my child. And he was silent. And that silence hurt almost as much as her words. He slowly picked up the ultrasound picture. And my hands were shaking. Not because I was weak. And because I was trying to understand how someone could look at a tiny picture of an unborn baby man see a problem instead of a person. We left shortly after. And the entire drive home was quiet. And Daniel kept looking at the road. He kept looking out the window. And finally, he apologized. And he said he was shocked. And that he didn't know how to react. But inside, something had already changed. And because I realized something that night. And a person can insult me. And he can defend myself. And a person can judge me. And he can walk away. And but when someone attacks my unborn child, and the person beside me says nothing. And that silence becomes something I will never forget. And for the next few days, I tried to convince myself that I was overreacting. Kept telling myself that pregnancy hormones were making everything feel heavier. Nth Maybe Victoria had spoken out of fear. Nth. Maybe she didn't realize how cruel her words were. N. But every time I looked at the ultrasound picture sitting on my nightstand, Ni remembered her face. Nth. The way she looked at my baby like a mistake. Not a child. Not her grandchild. N. A problem. Nand. That was something I couldn't ignore. Daniel noticed I had become quieter. N. Before, whenever his mother said something hurtful, I would complain for a few minutes and eventually move on. This time was different. I wasn't angry. I wasn't arguing. I was simply disappointed. Nand. I think that scared him more than any fight could have. One evening, while we were preparing the baby's room, Daniel finally asked what I was thinking. Ni looked around at the half-painted walls, the boxes of baby clothes, the little crib we had just assembled. Everything in that room represented hope, but after that night, it also represented something else. A responsibility. The responsibility to protect our child from anyone who made them feel unwanted. I told Daniel that I didn't know how to move forward. Not because of his mother, because of him. I explained that I understood being shocked. I understood freezing in the moment. But what hurt was realizing that when someone attacked our baby, my first instinct was to fight, and his was to stay quiet. Daniel didn't defend himself. He just sat there. Because he knew I was right. For the first time, he admitted something he had avoided for years. His mother had always been difficult. Everyone knew it. His father knew it. His sister knew it. Even Daniel knew it. But he had spent his entire life adapting to her behavior instead of challenging it. Whenever she criticized someone, the family ignored it. Whenever she crossed a line, everyone waited until she calmed down. Whenever she hurt someone, people made excuses. Because confronting Victoria was exhausting. And everyone had learned the easiest way to survive was to stay silent. But now there was a difference. The person being affected wasn't just him. It was me. And our child. The next morning, Daniel called his mother. I wasn't in the room, but I heard his voice change. Usually, when he spoke to Victoria, he sounded like a son trying to avoid disappointing his mother. This time, he sounded like a husband and a father. He told her that what she said was unacceptable. That our baby was not a curse. That I deserved respect. That she didn't get to make decisions about our child. For a few minutes, I heard only Daniel talking. Then silence. Then his voice became quieter. The call ended. When he came back into the room, I could tell it hadn't gone well. Victoria had reacted exactly how we expected. She didn't apologize. She accused me of creating drama. She claimed she was only being realistic. She said she was trying to protect the family. The same family she was supposedly protecting was now divided because of her. A few hours later, she sent me a message. At first, I thought maybe it was an apology. I hoped it was. Instead, it was a long explanation about why she believed she was right. She said she had seen many families suffer because they ignored warning signs. She said I was letting emotions control my decisions. She said Daniel was changing because I was influencing him. That last part was what bothered me most. Because it revealed how she saw me, not as his wife, not as the mother of his child, but as someone who had taken her son's loyalty away. I didn't respond. For years, I had tried to earn Victoria's approval. I tried to be polite. I tried to avoid conflict. I tried to make myself easier to accept. But that night, I realized something. No matter how kind I was, someone who had already decided I was the problem would always find a reason to blame me. So I made a decision. I would stop trying to be accepted by someone who refused to accept my child. And that decision would completely change my relationship with Daniel's family. The weeks after that conversation were the strangest period of my pregnancy. On one hand, things between Daniel and me became stronger. On the other hand, his relationship with his mother started falling apart. And honestly, I had mixed feelings about it. I never wanted Daniel to lose his family. I never wanted him to feel like he had to choose between me and his parents. But I also knew something important. A family cannot be protected by sacrificing the person who is supposed to be your partner. For years, Daniel had learned to survive his mother's behavior by ignoring it. But ignoring something doesn't make it disappear. It only teaches the person doing it that they can continue. Victoria noticed that Daniel was no longer responding the way he used to. Before, she could guilt him into changing his mind. She could make him feel responsible for her emotions. She could remind him of everything she had done for him. But this time, nothing worked. Because every conversation came back to one thing. The baby. Our child had become the one thing Daniel refused to compromise on. That seemed to frustrate her more than anything. She started telling relatives that I was controlling him. She said I had changed him. She claimed I was separating him from his family before the baby was even born. The strange thing was, she never mentioned the reason. She never told anyone what she had actually said. She only told the part where she was being excluded. At first, some relatives believed her. They contacted Daniel and encouraged him to forgive his mother. They said she was older, that she had different beliefs, that she was probably just worried. But then Daniel did something unexpected. He stopped protecting her image. Not by attacking her. Not by exposing every private conversation. He simply told the truth. He told them that his mother had told us to end the pregnancy because she feared the baby would damage the family. The reaction was immediate. People who had defended her suddenly became quiet, because there is a big difference between a grandmother being worried and a grandmother asking her son and daughter-in-law to erase their child. Even Daniel's father, who had stayed silent that night, finally admitted that Victoria had gone too far. He confessed that he had spent years avoiding arguments with her. He thought silence kept the family together, but he realized silence had only allowed her behavior to continue. A few weeks later, Victoria requested a meeting. She said she wanted to clear the air. Daniel asked if I wanted to attend. I hesitated. Part of me wanted answers. Another part of me didn't want to sit across from someone who had made me feel like my baby was unwanted. Eventually, I agreed. But I set one condition. The conversation would not be about convincing me that she was right. It would be about whether she understood what she had done. When we arrived, Victoria looked different. Less confident. Less certain. And for the first time, she seemed to realize that this wasn't another disagreement where everyone would eventually move on. As she started by saying she never meant to hurt me. But I had heard that sentence many times before. People often say they didn't mean to hurt you. But intentions don't erase damage. Daniel calmly reminded her that the problem wasn't just her words. It was the belief behind them. As she had looked at our child and decided that child was a threat before even knowing anything about them. Victoria became emotional. She said she was scared. Then she talked about family history. And about illnesses she had seen. And about her fear of having a grandchild who might struggle. And for a moment, I understood something. Her fear was real. But fear does not excuse cruelty. And a person can be afraid and still choose kindness. And a person can be worried and still choose love. And she didn't. And that was the part she needed to understand. Then something happened I didn't expect. And Victoria looked at the ultrasound picture we had brought with us. And the same picture she had rejected weeks earlier. And her expression changed. And quietly admitted that she had been so focused on protecting her idea of a perfect family that she forgot there was already a family sitting in front of her. It wasn't a full apology. Not yet. But it was the first crack in the wall she had built. Before we left, Daniel told her something that changed everything. He said she was welcome to be part of our child's life. But only if she learned to love the child she was given. Not the child she imagined. Not the child she could use to represent the family. Nth actual child. Victoria didn't answer. Nesh just sat there quietly. Nan for the first time since we announced the pregnancy. She had nothing to say. The months after that meeting were not perfect. I wish I could say Victoria woke up the next morning as a completely different person. But real change rarely happens that quickly. People don't undo years of behavior with one apology. They prove it through actions. Slowly. Over time. That was exactly what happened. Victoria started small. She stopped making comments about my pregnancy. And she stopped giving unwanted opinions about every decision we made. And she stopped treating our child like a reflection of the family name. And instead, she started asking questions. Real questions. How was I feeling? Did I need help? Was there anything she could do? At first, I was cautious. It was difficult to forget the moment she looked at my unborn child and called that baby a curse. Some wounds don't disappear just because someone says sorry. But I noticed something important. She wasn't apologizing to get access to the baby. She was changing because she finally understood that she had been wrong. When our daughter was born, the entire family gathered at the hospital. Victoria stood in the doorway, holding a small blanket she had made herself. Not an expensive gift. Not something meant to impress anyone. Just something simple. And something she had spent weeks creating. When she saw our daughter for the first time, she started crying. Not because she felt guilty. And because she finally saw what she had almost lost. A beautiful little girl who had done nothing except enter the world. And a child who had never been a problem. And a child who had only ever deserved love. And Victoria apologized to me that day. Not the kind of apology filled with excuses. Not the kind where someone says they are sorry, but explains why they were right. A real apology. As she admitted that she had been obsessed with the idea of a perfect family. As she cared so much about appearances that she forgot what family actually meant. Love. Acceptance. And protection. She said the words she should have said months earlier. She was wrong. I accepted her apology, but I also kept the boundaries we had created. Because forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean giving someone unlimited chances to hurt you again. It means you stop carrying the anger while still protecting yourself. Years passed. Our daughter grew into a happy, confident child. She never knew the story behind her birth. She never knew that someone once looked at her existence as a problem. And I am grateful for that. Because children should grow up knowing they are loved, not knowing they had to prove they deserved it. Daniel changed too. The man who once stayed silent finally learned that keeping peace isn't always the same as doing the right thing. Sometimes peace is just silence that allows someone to keep hurting others. He became the kind of father I always hoped he would be. Protective. Present. Fearless when it mattered. Looking back, I realized the hardest part of that entire experience wasn't Victoria's cruel words. It was the moment afterward. The moment when I had to wonder whether my husband would stand beside me. And thankfully, he did. Not immediately. Not perfectly. But he grew. And sometimes, that matters more. People often ask me if I regret telling Victoria about the pregnancy. The answer is no, because that moment revealed everything. It showed me who needed to change. It showed Daniel who he needed to become. And it showed me that I was already a mother before my daughter was born. A mother protects. A mother fights. A mother doesn't allow anyone to make her child feel unwanted. Victoria once told me my baby would curse the family. She was wrong. My daughter didn't curse our family. She healed parts of it that had been broken for years. She taught her grandmother humility. She taught her father courage. And she taught me something I will never forget. A family is not defined by blood. It is defined by the people who choose to love you when it matters most. The tiny baby Victoria once rejected became the person who brought everyone together. And every time I see my daughter smile, I remember something important. No child is born as a mistake. No child is a burden. Every child deserves to be welcomed into the world knowing one simple truth. They are loved. Always. Thanks for reading.